You'd think I could learn to keep my mouth shut after this one. All right. Does anybody remember the last chapter we read? Cindy? 9. So did we read 10? Come on, folks, help me out here. Thanks. Which one? We're on 12? Okay, well, I thought Cindy was the last one who read. Does anybody remember? I'm almost positive you were the last one who read. You remember reading?
No, I wasn't the last one.
Oh, okay.
And I read 9. And she accidentally started reading 12 because she was in the wrong place.
So where is the chapter we begin with? 12. All righty. Sounds good to me. All right, I need some readers. Okay, come on up, brother. And yeah, 12. If you'd like to hand the book to your wife, and she can read 13. Okay. Again, you don't have to.
He ran through soggy fields and down slimy riverbeds. Sometimes the dogs came close. Sometimes they even found him. But swift feet, rivers, and watery pits hid him. He took his food from the fields, dug roots from the roadside, slept in trees, hid in ditches, crawled through briars and mud. For days he ran, not daring to stop or eat. He drank the rain, half naked, all filthy. On he walked, stumbled, crawled, and clawed. Caves were castles now. Pits were home. In times past, mothers had always told their children that if they did not behave, they would end up like the town drunk. No longer. They had a better and more frightening story. Be good, or you'll end up like the giant killer. In Jerusalem, when teachers taught students to be submissive to the king and honor the Lord's anointed, David was the parable. See, this is what God does to rebellious men. The young listeners shuddered at the thought and somberly resolved never to have anything to do with rebellion. So it was then, so it is now, so it shall ever be. Much later, David would reach a foreign land in a small, very small measure of safety. Here too he was feared, hated, lied about, and plotted against. He shook hands with murder on several occasions. These were David's darkest hours. We know them as his pre-king days, but he didn't. He may have assumed this was his lot forever. Suffering was giving birth. Humility was being born. By earthly measures, he was a shattered man. By heaven's measure, a broken one.
Good stuff, Robert.
Others had to flee as the king's madness grew. First 1, then 3, then 10, and eventually hundreds. After long searching, some of these fugitives made contact with David. They had not seen him for a long time. The truth was that when they did see him, they didn't recognize him. He had changed. His personality, his disposition, his total being had been altered. He talked less. He loved God more. He sang differently. They had never heard these songs before. Somewhere lovely beyond words. Some were lovely beyond words, but some could freeze the blood in your veins. Those who found him and decided to be his fellow fugitives were a sorry, worthless lot. Thieves, liars, complainers, fault finders, rebellious men with rebellious hearts. They were blind with hate for the king and therefore all authority figures. They would have been troublemakers in paradise if ever they could have gotten in. David did not lead them. He did not share their attitudes, yet unsolicited they began to follow him. He never spoke to them of authority. He never spoke of submission, but every one of them submitted. He laid down no rules. Legalism is not a word found in the vocabulary of fugitives. Nonetheless, they cleaned up their outward lives. Gradually, their inward lives began to change too. They didn't fear submission or authority. They didn't even think about the topic, much less discuss it. Then why did they follow him? They didn't exactly. It was just that he was, well, David. That didn't need explanation. And so, for the first time, true kingship had its nativity.
Well, this is talking about after killing Goliath and then being on the run and Saul throwing the spear at David and trying to kill him. And this telling of the children, don't be rebellious or you'll end up like David, meaning he became a parable, a negative connotation, negative to even the people of God. And he didn't have time or opportunity to explain to everybody. But God was at work. And I can just see that, because they lived in caves and I can just see them sitting around the campfire and all these men and, their faces just a glow, number one, from the campfire, but from David as he sits and he begins to share. And, David from the very beginning was just a shepherd boy, but he knew the Lord. I mean, he didn't get into religion. Remember we talked about Samuel. Samuel was the great elder in the land, and every child, if they ever wanted to be a man of God, wanted to go live in the tabernacle and do it just exactly the way Samuel did. But David didn't do it the way Samuel did. David did it the way that the Lord had it in his heart, and he sought the Lord when he was young, and he found the Lord. And so David wasn't unfamiliar with backwoods and valleys and this sort of thing, and staying out there all night with the sheep. That was no big deal to him. It's a big deal to some great preacher with a collar or something might find that very offensive. Oh my God, really? But David knew that much of his real time that he got with the Lord was in such places. And so you can see him sitting around the campfire, and David, I can see him not preaching, just sharing. Just telling them and singing the songs that the Lord had given him. And I can see them hearing these things and realizing that this man has a whole different perspective. And you got to remember, this guy went into the tabernacle and got the showbread that was only meant for priests and ate it and didn't die. This man eventually set up the Holy of Holies in his backyard and danced before God in the Holy of Holies. And not only didn't die, but was blessed. And that's because, well, first of all, that's not because he was greater than all other men. It's because he had found union with the one who was welcome in the Holy of Holies. The one who was welcome, for whom the bread was made, Christ, and is the bread. And had so identified with the Lord that it was not an offense, but an offense to all other religious people, and would be. And no explanation. I can see the talk of the whole nation, some going, well, I kind of like that David guy now, and some of them going, he's a rebel, remember Nabal said that, or Abigail's husband, well, there are a lot of breakaway servants in this land, slaves in this land who break away from their masters, but I believe there were both sides, that there were some who who thought, I think there's something more here than we realize. But the people that began to gather heard the word, and I believe they heard the word of life. And I do believe, just like that book says, that at first they were rebels in many ways. Most of the people, they were running from hard times, they were running from authority, they were running from this and that. But they got there and they were no longer running from, they were running to the Lord. And, they guarded David. They guarded him all the days of his life because of what he represented, and the word that came out to them was life. And that's why years and years and years later, after the kingdom was set up and everything, and one of his sons rose up and overthrew him, and he's leaving, here's the same 300 guys or 600, whatever, that was with him in the caves going, look, we found out when we were on the run, we found out when we were in the caves that this wasn't about having the kingdom as far as a big castle-looking building and servants that you say go in. With the kingdom is God being in the midst of you. See, they learned that. They learned that. And they learned it right there around those campfires. And they learned it as they're walking along and they're just sharing the word. And you better believe David was an environment. He was an environment. And he brought the Lord. He brought the Lord. And, we have that choice, each one of us, of being a Saul or a David. Both were kings. But David, I don't believe, ever thought of himself really as a king. I think he knew that God said you're a king, and therefore he did whatever. But I think that because the King of Kings was formed in him, that he carried himself as a king without knowing what that meant. He didn't study what that meant. He was kingly in his dealings. He was honorable. He was I don't know, it's not just words that he did. It was the spirit of the king within him. And therefore that must be raised up to be a king. We sit around and go, well, why don't you raise me up? Why don't you make me something? What's wrong with you? Well, because he realizes if he raises you up, you're going to start throwing him spears. So he's waiting for the arising of the king in you. He's waiting for the arising of the lamb in you. He's waiting for the arising of the servant in you. He's waiting for the arising of the life in you, so that he can honor. And just like Jesus riding on that donkey into Jerusalem. That donkey's getting honored just like Jesus was, in the sense that everybody's going, but the donkey was doing nothing but carrying him. And that's what you're doing, is carrying him. But you get a lot of honor along with him. Just don't in your heart ever take it as unto yourself. Just realize this would never be the case if it wasn't for Jesus. This would never be the situation. All right, let's see. Mallory, you want to read the next chapter?
Why, David, why? The place was another nameless cave. The men stirred about restlessly. Gradually and very uneasily they began to settle in. All were as confused as Joab, who had finally voiced their questions. Joab wanted some answers, now. David should have seemed embarrassed, or at least defensive. He was neither. He was looking past Joab like a man viewing another realm which only he could see. Joab walked directly in front of David, looked down on him, and began roaring his frustrations. Many times he almost speared you to death in his castle. I've seen that with my own eyes. Finally you ran away. Now for years you have been nothing but a rabbit for him to chase. Furthermore, the whole world believes the lies he tells about you. He has come, the king himself, hunting every cave, pit, and hole on earth to find you and kill you like a dog. But tonight you had him at the end of his own spear, and you did nothing. Look at us, we're animals again. Less than an hour ago, you could have freed us all. Yes, we could all be free right now. Free. And Israel too. She would be free. Why, David, why do you not end these years of misery? There was a long silence. Men shifted again, uneasily. They were not accustomed to seeing David rebuked. Because, said David very slowly, and with a gentleness that seemed to say, I heard what you asked, but not the way you asked it. Because once, long ago, he was not mad. He was young. He was great, great in the eyes of God and men, and it was God who made him king. God, not man. Joab blazed back. But now he is mad, and God is no longer with him, and David, he will yet kill you. This time it was David's answer that blazed with fire. Better he kill me than I learn his ways. Better he kill me than I become as he is. I shall not practice the ways that cause kings to go mad. I will not throw spears, nor will I allow hatred to grow in my heart. I will not avenge, not now, not ever. Joab could not handle such a senseless answer. He stormed out into the dark. That night, men went to bed on cold, wet stone and muttered about their leaders' distorted, masochistic views of relationships to kings, especially mad ones. Angels went to bed that night too, and dreamed in the afterglow of that rare, rare day that God might yet be able to give his authority to a trustworthy vessel.
Michael, would you read the next?
What kind of man was Saul? Who was the one who made himself David's enemy, anointed of God, deliverer of Israel, and yet remembered mostly for his madness? Forget the bad press, forget the stinging reviews, forget his reputation. Look at the facts. Saul was one of the greatest figures in human history. He was a farm boy, a country kid who made good. He was tall, good-looking, and well-liked. He was baptized into the Spirit of God. He also came from a good family. In his lineage were some of the greatest historical figures in all humanity. Abraham, Jacob, Moses, these were his ancestors. Do you remember the background? Abraham had founded a nation. Moses had set that nation free from slavery. Joshua gave those people a toehold in the land that God had promised them. The judges kept the whole thing from disintegrating into total chaos. That's when Saul came along. It was Saul who took these people and welcomed them into a united kingdom. Saul united a people and founded a kingdom. Few men have ever done that. He created an army out of thin air. He won battles in the power of God, defeated the enemy again and again, as few men have ever done. Remember that, and remember that this man was immersed in the Spirit. Furthermore, he was a prophet. The Spirit came on him in power and authority. He did and said unprecedented things, and it was all by the power of the Spirit resting on him. He was everything people today are seeking to be. Empowered with the Holy Spirit, able to do the impossible for God, a leader chosen by God with power from God. Saul was given authority that is God's alone. He was God's anointed, and God treated him that way. He was also eaten with jealousy, filled with self-importance, and willing to live in spiritual darkness. Is there moral in these contradictions? Yes. It will splinter a lot of your concepts about power, about great men and women under God's anointing, and about God himself. Many pray for the power of God, more every year. Those prayers sound powerful, sincere, godly, and without ulterior motive. Hidden under such power and fervor, however, are ambition, a craving for fame, and a desire to be considered a spiritual giant. The person who prays such a prayer may not even know it, but dark motives and desires are in his heart, in your heart. Even as people pray these prayers, they are hollow inside. There is little internal spiritual growth. Prayer for power is the quick and short way, circumnavigating internal growth. There is a vast difference between the outward clothing of the Spirit's power and the inward filling of the Spirit's life. In the first, despite the power, the hidden man of the heart may remain unchanged. In the latter, the monster is dealt with. Interesting about God, he hears all those requests for power, which fervent young men and women pray in every generation, and he answers them. Very often, he grants those requests for power, for authority. Sometimes in answering them, he says yes to some very unworthy vessels. He gives unworthy people his power, even though they are a pile of dead man's bones inside. Why does God do such a thing? The answer is both simple and shocking. He sometimes gives unworthy vessels a greater portion of power so that others will eventually see the true state of internal nakedness within the individual. So think again when you hear the power merchant. Remember, God sometimes gives power to people for unseen reasons. A person can be living in the grossest of sin, and outer gift will still be working perfectly. The gifts of God, once given, cannot be recalled, even in the presence of sin. Furthermore, some people living in just such lives are the Lord's anointed, in the Lord's eyes. Saul was living proof of this fact. The gifts cannot be revoked. Terrifying, isn't it? If you are young and have never seen such things, you may be certain that sometime in the next 40 years you will see. Highly gifted and very powerful men and women, reputed to be leaders in the kingdom of God, do some very dark and ugly deeds. What does the world need? Gifted men and women, outwardly empowered, or individuals who are broken, inwardly transformed? Keep in mind that some who have been given the very power of God have raised armies, defeated the enemy, brought forth mighty works of God, preached and prophesied with unparalleled power and eloquence, and thrown spears, and hated other people, and attacked others, and plotted to kill, and prophesied naked, and consulted witches.
Well, those two chapters were contrasts in one way. One Mallory read is Joab, the captain of the host of David's armies, coming to him and going, why do you not kill him? Why do you not, the Lord gives you the opportunity to kill Saul and you don't do it. This man has done nothing but evil to you. And, when our men speak badly about him, you tell them to be quiet and to get their eyes on the Lord. And, what is the deal? And, if you know anything about Joab, he's hot-headed, he's a perfect man to be the head of the armies of David. But he just, and I believe that he held the view of most of the people. And that is, this guy, and he said, and right there in that chapter, well, this guy, he's anointed, he's turned Israel around and made a kingdom, and he's won and he's had the Spirit on him, and he's prophesied, but also he's a bad man. He's done this, and he's done that, and he's done this, and he's done that, and he's done this. And therefore, David, we need to kill the man and set you up because you will make a stand for God. And everything that they said was this tree of the knowledge of good and evil, as opposed to the tree of life. Put a few little branches on this. It's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Well, I see good, yeah, but I see evil. And the deal is that I see more evil than good. Or, in today's modern deal, I actually see more good than evil, but since I see evil, then he should be killed. He should be put away. We're not talking about David right now, we're talking about Saul. See, if we can believe that he's got the heart of David, then we'll support him. But David was supporting Saul. Hello? Is that right or wrong? What was he doing it on? The basis of there's good, more good than evil? Or, yes, there's evil, but I don't believe that David was considering the good or the evil. I believe that David said, first God anointed him, then God anointed me, and then there's going to be a transfer. And when God makes that transfer, it'll be done. And until God does it, it's going to be us putting our hands to what God's trying to do. And I'm going to honor God in this thing. And I'm going to keep my heart right. You know what? That was the whole deal. It even said in the chapter there, I'm not going to throw spears. I'm not going to, because if I do, then why would God want to set me up? I'm just like Saul. he may deserve it. I believe David probably knew, what is the phrase that he used? I think it was him that used it, the plague of his own heart. Anybody know of the plague of your own heart? You know better than anybody else. I mean, really, when you get right down to it, we're all motivated by the same things. Jesus isn't. He's different. That's the only difference. That's why we must be born again of this incorruptible seed, because we are corruptible. But not just born again as some event, being born again, not of corruptible, but of incorruptible seed. By the word of God which liveth. By the word of God which liveth and abideth forever. Not just by scriptures and truths and doctrines. And David said, no, I'm sorry, I will not violate the king that I see, which the king that he saw was the Lord. Amen? The king that David saw was the Lord. And he said, I will not violate the king that I see in my dealings with somebody else. If I am using different means to reach a good end, then I have failed. The cross is the means and the end. And if you violate it in little things along the way, trust me, when you get down to the end, you've violated it all. You determine every step, every thought, and I know that most of us aren't to the point of every step, every thought. That's not, but we're talking about David. We're talking about what I desire. Every step, every thought. Because when I have thoughts that go contrary to it, they are my enemies when they're contrary to the Lamb. And when I say they're my enemies, I don't mean that I am this righteous thing that goes, that's my enemy. I had the thought.
Yeah, that's right.
And trust me, just give it a little bit and I'll ride that baby. And it'll be gone and I'm with it, gone with it. Whew! It doesn't take long. There's some of us here, we don't have a lot of slack to mess around. Because the enemy's got a way that he could just take us and pull us off. There's some of us that have to have the Lord. It's life or death. It's not good or evil. It's life or death. And you realize that. I can't afford to think this thought. I can't afford to meditate on such things. I can't release anger or release self-pity or if I release that, I will be ensnared and entangled for weeks, and I don't have weeks to give away to the devil in my own mind, in my own flesh. I don't want to do that. God, I stand with you against me.
Yes.
And you'll only do that not because it's the good thing to do as opposed to the evil. You'll never do it every time for that reason. You'll do it one or two times because you want to maintain a certain air of deception to yourself that you're a righteous person. Well, it really is what it is. It's a certain deception to ourselves that we're righteous, so we go with the good and not the evil. Same tree, but we do that and draw some form of self-righteousness from that. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about where you will not violate the Lord. It's not a question of what they deserve. It's not a question of justice. Justice can be one of the hardest things to deal with because this isn't just. It's a toughie. I'm telling you, it's a tough one. The injustice within us a lot of times is not evil. It's good, but it's not the Lamb. Does anybody understand what I'm saying? Injustice is one of the tough ones because it's so right. And regularly, see, because here's the way I do it. Lord, I can't stand up in front of these people and preach this if I'm not going to live it. I can't establish a place on the basis of this if I don't have my full intention of it being the foundation and basis of who I am. And the surety that everything's okay is the fact that that's my foundation. Because if this does pass away, that foundation can easily be laid. If it passes away in me, eventually it passes away here, and then we're, Do you understand what I just said? And that's easy for you to sit out there again and look, but these things aren't just being shared for facts. You need to be tucking this away, going, you know what, I'm going to face these issues, and you may be facing them now. But if you're not, like the book said, 40 years from now, you will. And I would like, I'd like to have a few little things in my arsenal to be able to pull out and go, oh yeah, man, thank God the Lord was showing me that and dealing with it and change things in me so that when I get in, see, here's us. We just walk along blindly and all Christian, what was that? Oh God, show me what that was. Oh, reveal to me. Help me to understand. How come I have a big knot on my head? Where did that come from? And oh my God. So we go through a week or a month of, well, this is that, and then, oh, thank you, Jesus. Well, I learned from that. What was that? That's a whole other different thing, man. Wow, wasn't expecting that, And so that's our Christian walk. Dope-de-dope-de-dope, boom. And God is like way up there to us in our mind. He's way up there, leaning over, looking down, going, well, he's about to hit the old boom again. And he'll be inquiring. Hey, that is not the way this thing's supposed to be. We're supposed to be knowing the Lord, and I promise you, you will avoid things by knowing the Lord, and will miss many of them. Boom, what was that? Because you're growing up in Him in all things. That doesn't mean you'll avoid everything, but you will avoid many things that you'll never know that you would have run into. Many snares by life, by His nature, by His way. I'll tell you a few funny stories, then we'll read again. But when I was like 20 years old, before I came to the Lord, I was dealing drugs, and I got busted. And I won't go into the full story, but one of the ways I got busted was through the drummer that was in our band when I was in high school. Now I was 20, so I've been out of high school a couple of years. The drummer invited him over, and he'd become a cop in the last 2 years, and I didn't know it. And I didn't realize he'd become a cop, and I didn't know who narked on me or whatever, but I was, back in those days, I guarantee you they were asking 25 years in the state penitentiary for me. And I ended up getting probation, I was the first one in Dallas County ever to get off with probation. Everybody got some time that had over 25 libs of marijuana. I know it sounds bad. It's because it was. I was dealing drugs. And I had this system, and I had these guys that sold the drugs for me, and I never sold drugs. I distributed them to these guys. They went out and sold it, and they brought the money back to me. But God found a way to get to me through this guy. And I never knew that he did it. And I never knew that he was a policeman until years later. And years later, I got a ticket somewhere and went in to talk to the judge about it, and he showed up in a police uniform. And of course, I was a Christian by then. I was in Bible school, but when I saw him in a police uniform, I just went, boom. You were the one You were the narc. Okay. But he proceeded to laugh and to tell me, yeah, I was the one. And he said, you know, I never liked you. He said, I remember when we were 15 years old, I invited you over to my house, and we were wrestling one night, and you threw me down on the ground, and you hurt my tailbone. So you didn't bust me because you're a cop. You busted me because I hurt your tailbone when you're 16 years old. You little sissy. Well, so me and Deb, by then, we purchased a car. I guess we were married by then, yeah. We purchased a car, and there was a whole deal with the tags and stuff, and we got pulled over. And he was involved. He was one of the policemen involved. And but he wasn't there. But he was involved later. And I went down to the station, and the captain looked at my thing, and he went back and talked to a bunch of people. And he came back and he said, "I'm not saying you're a big-time criminal, but everybody in this police station knows your name." Now I'm about to go to the mission field as a missionary. And it was this guy doing everything he could, and he knew he wanted me to get prison time, and everybody else had. And I had 10 years probation, and this guy put a little flag on my record that is on there today, that if I get pulled over, they sit there for 30 minutes and go through this process and say, you know, I mean, this armed and dangerous person, this flag comes up like this. And one time Jim Gentry, I was going to do his wedding, and we were doing the wedding rehearsal, and we were driving in his car, and he was driving, got pulled over and asked to see my license, pulled him to the back cop car and said, well, I'm not, you know, I just want to warn you, the guy you're riding with is a big-time criminal. He said, he's my pastor. To this day, they tell me every time, well, you know, you got a flag on your thing? And he said, and I had a cop right up here one time, got pulled over at IHOP, and he said, I have pulled murderers over that don't have the flag that you've got, that on them that you've got. Now, by the way, this was 35 years ago, 36 years ago, 37. He said, these guys murder, they rob, they do, and they don't have this thing. And that's been for, you know, 30 some odd years now that I've had that, and it's still every time, no matter what. And I've tried to talk to a few people at the police station. Well, it's on your record, it's always going to show up. And what the deal is it doesn't show anything. It doesn't show I've done anything in 30 some odd years. It just says that I'm a big time criminal and you better keep your eye on me, and if I do one thing wrong, throw me in prison. This guy put that on my deal. Well, the first couple of years it really bugged me. Lord, why do I have this strapped on me? Why is this embarrassment constantly there, no matter what, you know, under all sorts of different circumstances, you know? And it may sound weird, but I have learned that Jesus is my life. And the only doors I have open is Jesus. And the only acceptance I have is Jesus. And if everybody thinks I'm a big-time criminal, I'm not. I haven't been. I was. It's in my nature, but that's not the nature I've been living by for a lot of years. And so, I don't worry about things. I live by, that has worked something in me, and I live by Christ, and I believe I've avoided all sorts of things as a result of that. I'll tell you another one. You know, I'm the head of the corporation here. We own thousands, well, you know, probably if you really totaled up the property and assets and everything, a couple of million possibly. We're buying my house. I bought cars. Do you know that I can't get a credit card? I have bad credit, not because I did anything wrong, but I don't know if it's connected with, I can't get credit. Now, I don't need it because God always, everything I've ever needed, God has found a way. But if I ever needed it through them, I couldn't get it. But somehow, the Lord has always been my provider. And I've lived my whole life with bad credit, but fine. I'm telling you, this has not been an ugly thing to me. I've been just fine. God's totally provided. And if He didn't, I'd be in real bad shape because I couldn't get any credit. But I got credit with the King of Kings. And I'm telling you that I've never had bad credit. I've got everything should say he's head of a corporation worth so-and-so. He's bought his own house. He's da-da-da-da. But the way that it's set up, it occurred to me several years ago when, I'll just tell you, there have been people who have done all sorts of things, from unloosen my tires so that when I'm driving down the road they'll come off, to all sorts of stuff I can't even tell you. Major stuff to try to ruin my life, literally kill me if possible, all sorts of stuff. Just in the last 4 or 5 years. And it occurred to me that with this identity theft, if anybody ever tried to, they go, we can't give you no credit, you don't get no credit cards. I never have to worry about identity theft. Because nobody wants to be me. Nobody wants to be me, and that's the truth. Nobody wants my tickets. Nobody wants the police pulling them over all the time. Nobody wants no credit at all. Nobody wants... And yet, isn't that really how we're supposed to live in Christ? No credit at all. You understand what I mean? Just totally dependent upon God. I'd like to say that I do this because I'm a real spiritual person. I do it because I get locked into it. But from it, I believe identity theft and a million other things, I'm trying to paint a picture to you that being dependent on God has actually put me in a position where I'm not vulnerable to a whole lot of stuff like other people are. Another example, I guess we'll just close with this, but I've never put my name on any of our billboards or anything. If you drive by most churches, it'll say the name of the church, Pastor so-and-so. And I've never put my name on anything. And I asked the Lord years ago when we put up one of our first signs on Bolivar, and He said, don't put your name on it. I said, am I going to be fired soon? Back then, that's, you always, well, why not? Well, you got to give me an explanation. Well, I got to understand. It's got to be things. I can't just do something and trust you. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? But then years later, I was flying on an airplane, and I'm sitting there, and they're passing out the food, and the guy says, next to me said, no, I don't want to eat anything. So I finished part of mine. I said, you want some of my food or whatever? He said, no, I'm fasting. I said, oh, really? Are you a Christian? Or? He said, no, I'm a Satanist. He said, we've agreed together as Satanists to fast against the pastors and their families and children, to fast so that their families would start having problems, their kids would go wild and do bad things and make them look bad in the public eye, and destroy church after church after church by hitting the pastor, his wife, and his kids. Now he's telling me this. I said, look, could you take that outside? And I said, well, how do you, because now he doesn't know anything, so I can ask whatever I want. Well, how do you know who to pray against? And he said, well, it's real easy. These pastors, you just drive by the church, they got their name out front. I said, whew. But from that, I'm just saying that, if pride, and that may not be every pastor's reason for doing that, but pride could be a reason. You get your church and say, I want to see my name on that, and I want anybody know what I'm talking about? I mean, you can do that. And really go, and then the devil goes, yeah, you play right into my hands every time you live after pride, every time you put self first, every time you are playing my game, baby, and you work yourself right into my hands, and then you cry and whine and wonder why you get in trouble. Anybody know what I'm saying here? I'm telling you that going off into the desert, David and his men, David learned stuff. David learned to live a certain way. David was in tune with the Lord in ways that he never would have been otherwise. And I'm going to tell you that there's stuff God's going to put you through that you're going to think it's wrong or it's not just or what the heck is going on here and I've been faithful to you and this and that. And you need to trust your Father and say, thank you, Father. I don't see. Jesus stood before Pilate, and Pilate said, you better speak up and talk to me. And Jesus didn't say a word. And he said, if you don't, I have the power to crucify you or let you go free. And Jesus said, finally did talk to him, said, you have no power at all except it be given to my Father. That's what Jesus said to Pontius Pilate. David knew those kind of things when Shemaiah was cursing and Joab wanted to kill him. David said, no, maybe God sent him to curse me. Maybe God sent him to curse me? How many of you are ready for that? I'm used to that one, but and I bless him. I bless him. And I grieve for him. And I believe that wasn't David. That's the heart of the Lord. I believe that's the Lord that gets formed in us. And you say, I won't violate the Lord. I won't violate the Lord. I won't violate the Lord. I won't be like everyone else. I want to be like Jesus. I want it so bad. Well, who's going to know? Who's going to really honor that? Who's going to see? My Father. My Father will see His Son and be glorified. Your Father will see His Son and be glorified. Glory to God. That's where it's at. But you'll never know the full depth of that until Christ is formed in you, and then as the Son that He is within you, you'll feel His heart, and you'll know why it's so important that the Son please the Father, that Christ please the Father, and that He does that in you, just like He did 2,000 years ago. He's no different walking the streets of Nazareth 2,000 years ago than He is walking in you. He's the same. He's got the same motives. And He won't change. So let's let Him live. Scott, I'm going to have to let you talk some other time. How far did we get? What chapter did we? How many chapters are in this thing? Of course, thank God they're short, huh? They're short and my talk is long. So. How many more classes anybody know? Remember? You don't have a clue. I'm sure we're fine. Appreciate you guys reading. It's good. You didn't know you can get a longer one. Most everybody gets a little page and a half. 5 pages. Father, we just thank you for your goodness and your sweetness. Not just to us, but through us. To the Sauls, not just to the Davids, but to the Sauls. And we see you sweet and precious. Overcome us, Lord. Overcome us, Lord. Overcome us. Don't overcome our enemies. Overcome us, for the things in us are our enemies. Lord, let us truly stand with you against your enemies. Thank you, Lord. We love you, Jesus. We love you, Lord. we thank you to do it in Jesus' name. Amen. We're dismissed.